Yeah, hi guys, it's Brad here, and I'm just going to give a quick walkthrough of query tables. There's more detailed information in the text and notes of this module though. Okay, so just a reminder, this is the query we created in the previous module where we were creating a reporting page, and this is a query on email items. What we're seeing here are the individual rows, and we have selected some fields here to return these ones. Right, now what we want to do is we want to create a query table which is going to apply some transformations on this. We want a better code output for the status, and we want a formatted date field. So what we start with doing is going to the, I'll show you how to get there, go to the queries repository. So I'm just going to search for queries, and there he is. This is a standard repository. You shouldn't usually have to make it. It should be there for you. And inside here you should find this file controllers XML. If it doesn't exist, just create it. Just click new text file and give it that name. Right, so when we open that, just add, so it should have this XML. So controllers is the root tag and contain an element called source. And this will be the name of a file that you're going to create, and it's going to have your query table code in it. Okay, so so here's the file that I've created. Actually, I've already got it open. Here we go. Right, now this bit here is creating the table definition. Alright, and the table definition, it's first of all, it's got an identifier for it. It's got a descriptive name, and then it's got the name of a function which is going to generate the data. And then I do add a header for each column I want it to have. Now this function I've called load email summary. You call it whatever you want to call it for your purposes. It takes two arguments. The first is a result object, and the second is a root folder. The result object is the most important one. It gives you two pieces of information, the start row and the maximum rows, to generate data for. So this is what's been requested by the front end. You don't have to respect that. The framework will filter out any other rows anyway, but this allows you to efficiently get the information that the front end wants. In this case, we're going to run a query, that query that we created in the previous module, so I'm just calling it there by name. And that gives us a response object. And then I'm going to call this a use hits method on the response, passing it a function which receives each hit. So this is what Elasticsearch calls a row, basically a search hit. Now this use hits method, by the way, you can actually just, there is a property on response to get the list of hits as an array. The reason why it's good to use this one though is it supports paging. So if this is being called to generate, say, a CSV output, there might be many tens of thousands of rows, but Elasticsearch will only allow you to generate a maximum, I think it's 10,000 rows at a time. So by using use hits, it will iterate through that list, or will execute the query repeatedly to generate the full set of results. So you should definitely use that rather than the hits array. Alright, now inside here for each hit, I'm going to add a cell. So in this case, I'm just outputting the ID. I just want to see things running nice and simply. And then we call flush to flush that row, and the next time around it's going to create a new row. I'm keeping track of the number of rows because I'm going to report that back to the framework. So that's pretty much it. And so if I save that, and then I'm going to refresh my front ends, and you can see I've just output that data there. Now you can also see the query running in the back end just by going to well, let's find it. We'll go to the queries page. Now at the top here we have the actual queries, and then down the bottom this section we have query tables, and you can see there the identifier I've given it and the descriptive name. And then when I click on that, it's actually going to run for me. And you can see here it's applying pagination, so that's where it's relying on you using those parameters. Okay, so now the next thing I want to do here is just to show you the fully worked implementation. Now the module goes through this in detail in the notes, but I just want you to see it happening here. So we've still got email summary. Now you can see here I'm using hit.fields and then the field name. So hit.fields.domain, for example. And you can see I'm calling this getValue function. Now the reason for that is because any of these fields can return null. But I need to get the value property off that object. So that's what this function is for. So if the field it's null, that means say a road doesn't have a domain or it doesn't have a send status, it's just going to return an empty string. It's a very, very frequent cause of problems with reports is where people don't check for null, so always do that. Now this one here on the send status, so remember the send status just gives us a C or an F, a single letter status, but I want to display a word, a meaningful word. So we just have this little function here and it just applies an if statement. And the last one is the date. So I want to show a formatted date. So I've just created this method called getCleanDate. And all I do down here is firstly I use the formatter to parse the textual date value into a date object. And then I use this formatDate method which takes a date object and formats it as a short date. So hopefully that all makes sense. And if I save that, and then I'm just going to refresh the query page. Right, and there's all my data. There's the domain, the subject, the send status as a word, and the date as a short date field. And if I refresh in the front ends, you'll see that's applied there as well. Now, so that's all I wanted to show you, but just one more thing I'll touch on is this is calling a query. Query tables don't have to though, they can get data from anywhere. And one of the best ways of doing that is using k-criteria. So that's covered in another module, but it means you can do joins. So it's a much more powerful API for running queries. It's also slower, and it's less appropriate for aggregations. Elasticsearch really has some powerful aggregation capabilities that SQL queries don't have. Okay, so that's all for now. I hope that was useful. Thanks. Bye.